Book 1, Life Control.
All right, welcome to today's explainer. We are cracking open Peter Drucker's absolutely foundational management philosophy, the effective executive. Basically, we're handing you a highly actionable playbook for massively increasing your impact at work. Seriously, if you apply these principles, with some discipline of course, you are going to elevate your effectiveness to an entirely new level. So let's kick things off with a pretty simple question. Who exactly is an executive? Now, you might be picturing, someone with a super fancy C-suite title, a massive corner office, and a dedicated assistant. But Drucker completely shattered that myth. He defines it incredibly broadly. An executive is literally every single knowledge worker who is expected to make decisions in the normal course of their work that have a significant impact on results. So if you direct your own work and make calls that actually matter to your organization's goals, boom, you are an executive. And the really great news here is that effectiveness, it's not some rare genetic gift. It's a practice. It's something you can work at until it becomes a permanent habit. Okay, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. Anyone can be effective. 2. The 5 executive habits. 3. Mastering your time. 4. Eliminating time wasters. And 5. Focusing on contribution. Section 1. The 5 executive habits. Building the foundation. Drucker outlines 5 absolute essential habits of mind. Manage time systematically, focus on outward contribution, build on strengths, concentrate on priority areas, and make effective decisions. True effectiveness really requires focusing intensely on what you and your team can actually do, rather than constantly obsessing over your limitations. You build on your strengths, and you relentlessly prioritize. First things first, and second things, well, not at all. Section 2. Mastering your time, the limiting factor. Think about it, time is entirely unique. It's literally the one resource you cannot rent, hire, or buy. Drucker has this brilliant quote: "Effective executives do not start with their tasks, they start with their time." I mean, most of us sit down at our desks and just immediately start making a massive to-do list, right? But you can't actually start by planning because you don't even know how much time you really have. You have to find out where your time actually goes first. To take back control, we follow this strict 3-step chronological process. It's the absolute foundation of executive effectiveness. Step 1, recording time, like actually logging it to see reality. Step 2, managing time. This means actively cutting back on unproductive demands. And step 3, consolidating time. Let's take a closer look at why that last step is just so absolutely vital. Here's the deal. Discretionary time must be consolidated into large, continuous chunks. Small dribs and drabs, they are essentially useless for a knowledge worker. Having a few uninterrupted hours to just think, problem solve, and actually produce is way more valuable than a whole week of fractured 15-minute intervals constantly broken up by emails and quick chats. You need that space to execute. Section 3. Eliminating time wasters. Diagnosing the dysfunctions. So how do we actually clear out those large chunks of time by cutting back on unproductive demands? Well, you start by looking in the mirror and asking this kind of uncomfortable but totally necessary question. What do I do that wastes your time without contributing to your effectiveness? I highly challenge you to ask this directly to your colleagues. It takes some guts, for sure, but it instantly exposes hidden inefficiencies. Drucker maps out 3 main organizational dysfunctions, so you can essentially diagnose your own workplace right now. First, overstaffing. If your senior people spend more than, say, 1/10 of their time on feuds and human relations problems, your organization is overstaffed. People are just colliding with each other. Second, malorganization, which almost always shows up as an excess of meetings. And third, a malfunction in information flow. A classic symptom of this is people constantly showing up to those meetings totally unprepared. Speaking of the dreaded meeting, here is a highly practical invitation template straight from the source. It essentially goes, please come if you need the information or want to take part, but you will in any event receive right away a full summary of the decisions. This right here, it's a total masterclass in eliminating FOMO, the fear of missing out. By promising a comprehensive summary right off the bat, you give your colleagues full permission to skip it, and you save everyone a ton of time. Because the reality is this, undirected meetings are a real danger. They have to be an exception rather than the rule. Drucker really hammers home the too many meetings basically signifies that work that should be in one job is spread over several jobs. It means responsibility is way too diffused. Honestly, if you're meeting all the time, you simply aren't working. Which brings us to Section 4, focusing on contribution, from effort to results. Most executives tend to focus downward, on effort, on what the company owes them. But effective executives, they focus outward, on what they can contribute. Drucker uses a really fantastic nutrition metaphor here. Organizations need direct results. Think of those as the calories that keep the body moving today. But they also urgently need the building and reaffirmation of values, the vitamins and minerals. Without strong values, the organization just degenerates into total confusion and paralysis. You absolutely need both. And right alongside those calories and vitamins, there's a third vital area of contribution: building and developing people for tomorrow to renew human capital. Without this third area, the organization simply cannot sustain itself into the future. You have to provide today the leaders who can run the whole shebang tomorrow. Now, what about getting along with your team? Drucker argues that good human relations don't actually come from having some natural talent for people. Instead, they naturally emerge when everyone is hyper-focused on their contribution across 4 key areas: communications, teamwork, self-development, and the development of others. When your primary focus is on the work and the required results, effective relationships just kind of build themselves. You communicate better because you have to, and you develop others by demanding excellence. Which brings us to the number 1. There is exactly one cardinal rule for your everyday executive tools, like meetings, reports, and presentations. You must focus from the absolute start on the specific contribution it is supposed to achieve. State the purpose clearly, right when you begin, and when you finish, relate your conclusion directly back to that original intent. No more wandering, undirected brainstorms that just eat up your entire afternoon. All right, we're going to wrap up this explainer by leaving you with the ultimate question every effective executive must ask themselves constantly. What can I contribute that will significantly affect the performance and the results of the institution I serve? Write that down, stick it on your monitor. Let it shift your entire perspective from merely putting in effort to actually driving meaningful results. Seriously, if you start answering that question honestly tomorrow morning, how radically would your workday change? So here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover building on your strengths. Second, doing first things first. Third, mastering the decision process. And finally, putting together your own effectiveness action plan. Let's just dive right in. Section 1, build on your strengths. Or as I like to think of it, why well-roundedness is a complete trap. All right, take a look at the stark contrast on this slide. If you try to build your team purely to avoid weakness, which, let's be honest, is what a massive majority of managers actually do, you are practically guaranteeing a mediocre team. Structuring jobs to fit a safe personality or constantly asking, well, will this person be acceptable, just leads straight to favoritism, conformity, and ultimately super average output. You end up with safe, uninspiring hires. Instead, an effective executive staffs to maximize strength. They look at a role and ask, is this the person most likely to do an absolutely outstanding job in this specific area? Because look, the true test of an organization isn't whether it can hire a bunch of infallible geniuses. It's whether it has the capacity to make common people achieve uncommon performance. Check out this quote, "Strong people always have strong weaknesses too." It sounds incredibly backward, right? But it's true. To get extraordinary strength in one specific area, you absolutely have to put up with weaknesses in others. Think about it. Human excellence can really only be achieved in one area, or maybe a very select few. So focusing on what isn't there, obsessing over a team member's weakness, is just a massive waste of energy. If someone has excellence in a major area that is relevant to the task, and that excellence is going to make a huge difference to the outcome, you appoint them. You make their strengths productive, and you deliberately make their weaknesses irrelevant by surrounding them with other people who complement them. Now, let's flip this around and talk about managing upward. Yes, you actually have to manage your boss. Making the strength of your boss productive is actually a crucial key to your own effectiveness. Really effective executives do not sit around the water cooler complaining or worrying about what their boss can't do. Instead, they ask a very targeted question. What can my boss do really well? And once you figure that out, you follow it up with, okay, what do they need to know to use that strength? And what do they need to get from me to perform at their absolute best? By focusing on your superior's strengths rather than their shortcomings, you're aligning yourself with opportunity, and you help the whole organization move a whole lot faster. Moving right along to section 2, do first things first. We're talking about the power of ruthless concentration. If there is one absolute secret to effectiveness, it's concentration. Period. Effective executives do first things first, and here's the kicker. They only ever do one thing at a time. The more you work at making strengths productive, the more you realize you have to concentrate all your time, all your effort, and your resources on major opportunities. It requires a genuinely aggressive level of focus. An effective executive is constantly policing all their programs and tasks. Seriously, mentally scan your own to-do list right now. Is everything on there actually still worth doing? If it's not, you've got to get rid of it. You have to actively slough off the outworn old stuff to make room for the productive new stuff. Because if you don't cut the dead weight, you are never going to have the bandwidth to innovate. So you're probably wondering, how do you actually choose what stays and what goes? Well, look at the right side of this slide. Courage, way more than endless analytical data, dictates the rules for identifying priorities. You have to pick the future over the past. You need to focus on the opportunity rather than the problem. You've got to choose your own direction rather than just climbing onto whatever the current industry bandwagon is, and aim high for something that will actually make a real difference. The source material highlights the chemical company DuPont as a perfect historical example of this. They historically outperformed competitors because they had the sheer courage to abandon a product or a process before it even began to decline. They didn't wait around for problems to force their hand. They relentlessly focused their concentration on the future. All right, section 3, master the decision process. And surprisingly, why facts really shouldn't come first. I just absolutely love this quote. People inevitably start out with an opinion. To ask them to search for facts first is even undesirable. I know, that sounds completely backward to our modern data-obsessed culture, right? But an effective executive knows that a decision is a judgment. It's a choice between alternatives. And it is rarely ever a clean, obvious choice between right and wrong. Human beings simply do not naturally start with facts. We start with opinions. And fighting human nature? That's just a waste of time. So the effective executive encourages these opinions, but then they ask a critical, rigorous question. What would the facts have to be to make this opinion tenable? You demand that the people voicing an opinion take full responsibility for defining exactly what factual findings need to be looked for to back it up. You actually have to go out of your way to demand disagreement. Honestly, the very first rule of decision-making is that you do not make a decision unless there is disagreement. Every single highly effective American president in history had their own method of manufacturing the disagreement they needed to fully understand a decision. They deliberately brought in advisors who would passionately argue with each other. Why? Well, first, it's the only real safeguard against becoming a prisoner of the organization and its preconceived notions. A comfortable consensus is highly dangerous. Second, disagreements provide actual alternatives. A decision without a solid backup alternative is just a gambler's throw of the race. And third, conflict stimulates the imagination. You need that clash of conflicting views to make sure all major aspects of a matter are carefully examined and stress-tested before you commit. So, how do we actually put this into practice? Here are the 5 sequential steps to executive decision-making. First up, ask yourself, is this a generic situation or is it an exception? If it's an underlying generic situation, it needs a scalable rule or principle, not just a quick one-off fix. Second, define the boundary conditions. What is the absolute bare minimum this decision needs to accomplish to actually resolve the problem? Third, start with what is right rather than what is acceptable. You're probably going to have to compromise later anyway, but if you don't know what the purely right answer is, you'll end up making the wrong compromise. Fourth, convert the decision into action. And fifth, build in reality-based feedback. You need continuous testing against actual on-the-ground events, or you're condemning yourself to total ineffectiveness. Which brings us to this harsh but very true reality. Unless a decision has degenerated into work, it is not a decision. It is at best a good intention. Action commitments have to be baked into the decision from minute one. Who is doing what and by when? If no one is doing the actual work, you haven't decided anything. You've just had a really expensive conversation. And that leads us perfectly into section 4, your effectiveness action plan. This is where we turn all this high-level theory into daily discipline. Let's start with your calendar. Effectiveness isn't a personality trait, it's a daily self-discipline. First, you have got to record where your time actually goes. And do this in real time, not from memory days later, because our memories are terrible timekeepers. Audit your calendar and create a report of your actual hours. It will probably shock you, but it will definitely nudge you toward greater effectiveness. Second, start blocking long, continuous blobs of time on your calendar. As we discussed, real concentration requires unbroken time. 15 minutes here and 15 minutes there achieves absolutely nothing. And third, set hard, immovable deadlines for your most important activities. You have to force the issue. Next up is meeting mastery. You always need to be purpose-driven. State the why out loud the exact second a meeting begins, and then summarize at the very end to see if you actually achieved it. But look at that second bullet point. This is an absolute game changer for organizational drag. Use an opt-out meeting invite format. The source provides a brilliant email template you can literally steal today. It goes like this. I've asked Sarah and John to meet to discuss the Q3 budget. Please come if you need the information or want to take part. But you will, in any event, receive right away a full summary of the discussion and decisions, and you can comment then. This empowers your team to voluntarily skip meetings and protect their own concentration without that fear of missing out. And finally, ruthlessly ask if a recurring meeting has lived beyond its utility. If it has, axe it immediately, no mercy. Now, to truly drive impact, you have to align your own individual bandwidth with the broader needs of the organization. Ask for feedback frequently from your teammates, but even more importantly, have a transparent and, potentially uncomfortable conversation with your boss. Clearly list out the key contributions you should be accountable for and exactly how your contribution should be measured. But remember, this must be outcome-based. Assuming responsibility means focusing purely on your objective contribution. That is an entirely different mindset than simply trying to please the boss or just looking busy. I want to end this explainer with a really simple but provocative question for you to ask yourself before every single work week kicks off. What can I contribute to the organization this week? Write down the answer. Format it as objectives and key results, or OKRs. Then review it by the end of the week. By committing to this one simple practice, you take real pride in being an effective executive. You stop obsessing over your weaknesses, you actively demand disagreement, you ruthlessly block out your time, and you master the art of execution. So take a look at your calendar right now. What are you uniquely positioned to contribute this week?